We're there. Sean Walsh, hello.
Hello, Gavin. How are you?
Wow. Do you know there was this woman I used to work with at university called Esmeralda or something like that, and she used to wear feather boas. And I'd meet her in the car park when I parked the car in the morning, and I'd say, "Hi, Esmeralda, how are you?" And she'd go, "I remember this is a red brick university. Oh, darling, I think if it got any better, I'd go pop." So I
Well,
tend to say, if it got any better, I'd go pop because it's
I,
pretty good,
I
really.
was just expecting I'm okay, thanks. But that's
Oh,
that's
that's so.
that's even
No,
better.
you see, I get thrown. The problem is, in my pseudo intellectualism, I get thrown by the complexity of the question. So, really, and I do. Honestly, I really do. I'm not joking. When people say, "How are you?" I think, "Oh my God, at which level? In which category?" I can't answer this. So, I should say okay, but I'm a sucker for the question.
I wonder
So,
how you get on in New or how you do get on in New York then. When they say tell you to have a good day, do you ask them to unpack it?
no, I'm all right with having a good day. No, it honestly, it's how are you? I find that so existentially threatening because for most of my life
You've gone
I've
deep
had something.
already.
Well, but you see, I have several fears. I mean, one is of going mad, and the other is of being homeless, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't take sanity for granted, and I'm a bit of a sucker for questions. So to bring a full on thing like "How are you?" it just throws me. So if you just say "Good day" or "Go well" or whatever, it's fine. But turning it into a question of such existential potential really freaks me out. So,
Sorry, I asked now.
yeah, no, please don't ever ask again.
No.
Just say, in fact, I've got a friend in Vienna, an elderly priest, and we speak a lot most days, and I've trained him never to say "How are you?" And
Yeah.
it's good. So we kind of start with "Happy Feast Day"
Yeah.
or something, because obviously everyone needs a ritual to begin with.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
I just think "How are you?" is one of the worst ones imaginable.
Okay.
You know the German one, don't you? In Bavaria, "Grüß Gott." I love that. So greet God for me. In other words, say a prayer for me. So people meet each other and they say, "Grüß Gott." I'm absolutely fine with that.
Well, if we ever do this again, I will. I will. I will.
Just say
I'll
"Grüß
know what
Gott."
the. Yes, I'll say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Probably
Yes.
won't. I'll probably say how
Okay.
are you. I'll,
Well, I think it's downhill from now on.
yeah,
I think we peaked in the
it's a
first five
wrap.
seconds.
It's a
Yeah,
wrap.
that's right.
It's like that advice that was given to George Costanza in Seinfeld when he makes a joke in a board meeting and everyone laughs and then he carries on and it
Yes.
goes flat. So
Stop. Stop.
after that he
Stop.
just leaves. He just walks out of the meeting whenever anyone laughs. He just I'm out.
Absolutely.
I'm out.
Well, let's try not to leave.
No,
So
yeah.
it's very nice to meet you. I met you through a competitive retail outlet and was very impressed with your conversational skills and thought I'd like to talk to this man. He's very interesting.
Okay.
And so I won't name the competitive retail brand for. Let us say it is the brand that should not be named. But
Okay.
meanwhile, the Voldemort brand. Let's call it that.
Okay.
So it was very impressive seeing you on the Voldemort platform, and and I thought I'd like to talk to this man, and then I began to read what you'd written, and I thought, oh, this man's seriously clever. He's very good. And I have to say, without buttering you up, you do write some marvelous stuff, and so I thought what we might try and do is have a conversation between two academics of semi-distinguished careers. mine much less so than yours, and just talk about how it is we've come to be Catholics, because a lot of people imagine that being a Catholic or even being a Christian is a sign of intellectual flaccidity,
Mm.
uh, and I don't think it is.
No, certainly not. Um, I mean, okay. I mean, my background was academic philosophy a long time ago. I did my doctoral work in an area of philosophy which I suppose you would call the philosophy of mind. But it was it was where the philosophy of mind intersects with cognitive science and artificial intelligence. And my
That's
PhD
That's very bright stuff. I had some friends at Sussex who worked in that, and they were
Sussex is known for it. Yeah,
yeah, no, they were good. It
it's
was
where Margaret Bowden was, who
yes,
died.
Maggie. Yeah, no, mate. So can I just put in some brackets? Maggie Bowden used to have this dining club for the cleverest people in the university, and I and 2,000 others lay there desperately at night waiting for an invitation to. I never got one. Maggie Bowden was very
The
clever.
apostles on the coast.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
and there was also a guy there called Andy Clark who wrote a book
Yeah,
called Microcognition, and that was kind of the area of philosophy I was interested in. We're going back to the early '90s now,
yeah.
and there was an emerging paradigm in AI then called connectionism or parallel distributed processing, which was kind of the start of where they were trying to make artificial intelligence models more neurally faithful, more faithful to the architecture of the human brain, which I think just made that they were very they made them quicker at making the same mistakes was the way I thought of it.
That's
Um,
very funny.
I thought that this paradigm, or my PhD argued that this paradigm in AI connectionism implied a view of the human mind and human consciousness which was just straightforwardly contradictory and incoherent, and that therefore it was false by what philosophers call a modus tollens argument. But because I was doing that PhD and postdoctoral work, I was doing lecturing and seminar work at Liverpool University and a few others as well. So I taught the philosophy of religion. So obviously,
Oh, how exciting!
um, yeah, I mean, it was kind of all very rudimentary stuff. It was, it was Anselm's ontological proof. It was Aquinas' five
Come on,
ways.
listen. Give our listeners a break. Don't go. Don't tell them that Anselm's rudimentary. It's you'll
It
depress
was the
them.
way I taught it. But I'm going to say some, I
Okay,
was going to
so
say something about that actually. So I kind of had the intellectual attachment to theism. I thought these were good proofs.
right.
And as a teenager, my I was more interested in maths and philosophy. I started off wanting to be a mathematician, but then realised I was actually interested in the philosophy of maths, and I wouldn't have
Mm,
been a very competent
mm.
mathematician. So I switched over to philosophy. Um, and I was reasonably ahead in my reading. So I was interested by Russell and Russell's forlorn, as it turned out, project to derive mathematical truths from the axioms of logic. And I remember wondering at the time why couldn't Russell just leave it as it is and just leave the mystery in maths? Why does he have to try to explain it away? And of course, later on, you had the logical positivists. And when I was an undergraduate, I read Ayer's Language, Truth, and Logic, even though it was off syllabus. And it was just obvious to me that this book was, self-refuting in the way that we all now accept it was self-refuting. That it
Look,
was.
hang on, stop a minute. Let's translate this into the language that everyone can follow.
Sure.
Just explain what in words of two syllables, logical positivism, because of course it's dominated part of our academic and cultural climate.
Yeah, it's an assassination attempt by pseudoscientists on metaphysics.
Right. Oh, that's nice. That's really good. I like that.
Um,
That's very clever.
people who wanted to basically make philosophy a branch of science came up with theories of meaning, which, were they to be accepted, made the claims of metaphysics and the questions of metaphysics about the nature of God, about the nature of morality, would have made them meaningless. That was
So
what they.
can I interrupt for a moment and just to again bring it down a little bit further to place people at my IQ. Essentially, wasn't it a confusion of how and why? So the how people, which is the science people, uh, looked at the why stuff and said
Mm,
if we can bring in a certain amount of measurement
mm,
and proof, then we can contain the why questions. But
yeah.
that just failed totally, and also made for a terribly boring philosophy.
Yes, it was an awful philosophy. And that's a good way of putting it. I would add that they were actually trying to promulgate a theory of meaning, which was just a non-starter, even on its own terms. They wanted to say, or they did say, that the meaning of a sentence was just the way in which that sentence could be verified empirically.
Right, and then of course that becomes postmodernism and post-truth later on. Can
Yeah,
we talk about this a moment? Because I think this is
sure.
really interesting in terms of how people legitimately approach belief. Because the whole of our culture has been taught ever since, I don't know, 1700, pull a day out of the hat, that if you couldn't prove something, in an age where you made progress by proving things. After all, we've done fantastic things with engineers and medicine and tech, and it's all done by people who can prove things, because that's how they've managed to push the science forward. And they got so excited about proving things and controlling the environment that they thought, well, maybe that applies to absolutely everything. But the stuff it doesn't apply to is, who am I? Why am I here? Why do I need meaning in life? And,
Yeah.
and none of this is capable of being, well, you can't even measure it, let alone prove it. And wasn't that the fallacy that our whole culture has kind of gone sterile on?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, as you say, they try to reduce questions which were why questions to questions of how. And because technology has become more and more competent and made our lives more and more comfortable, there was a certain plausibility to that, even in the 1930s, for example. But
Yeah.
technology in the 1930s isn't always a happy conjunction, is it? Um,
Let's not go there for the
no,
moment.
let's not go there. And I didn't mean that facetiously, but it just isn't.
No, no,
Um,
no. There's a
and
subject that's off
and
limits that we
there
could
was
both explore, which we won't.
yeah, and the problem with logical positivism, in its own terms, is that it refutes itself, because its criterion of meaning is itself a metaphysical claim.
So, how did you
And
get yourself out of the hands of the how people into something more useful for the why people?
I read Wittgenstein's Tractatus,
Ah.
and which you can read in an afternoon, I think, and
Oh,
some of
you are posh. You are. You can't sit here and just say that you read Wittgenstein's
I,
Tractatus.
I didn't say I read it in an afternoon.
When we're doing this, and we're kind of, how.
Gavin, you probably could, but
No,
it
no,
took
I
me
couldn't
longer
at
than an
all.
afternoon.
No, but my
But
trick,
but
you know how
but
you need to survive in sort of in academic dialogue, and so, when people would introduce Wittgenstein into the conversation, my first bullshitting alert radar thing would say, "Excuse me, are we talking early or late
Well,
Wittgenstein?"
I'm going to yeah, okay. I'm referring specifically to his book, The Tractatus, the only book he published while he was alive, and it's a very short book, and it's a series of basically aphorisms. It's kind of like Nietzsche in that regard. And it was curious to me as an undergraduate that the logical positivist people, thought this was some kind of manifesto in support of what they were doing, because towards the end of the Tractatus, Wittgenstein makes he makes within the Tractatus offers a theory of meaning which differentiates between the things you can say propositionally and the things you can't, which kind of conforms with what the positives were doing. But they didn't pay attention to the stuff that Wittgenstein was interested in that you can't say, that is kind of discussed and mentioned at the back end of that book. Um, I wrote I wrote a piece about this recently for that other place, in which I made the argument
The Voldemort platform.
of that platform, yeah, in which
Shame on
I,
you.
ma- I made the argument. I made the argument that Wittgenstein's Tractatus is actually an anti-reductionist piece of work, which has been incorporated into a reductionist worldview, and that this was
Okay, so you're going to have to simplify things a moment.
okay.
So my understanding is that early Wittgenstein says that words define. Wait, no, which way around is it? That um, the words reflect meaning. In other words, meaning takes precedence, and you find the right words to describe the meaning.
Yeah,
The degree, therefore, of objectivity. And later Wittgenstein, whom I disapprove, or I'm less fond of, reverses it and begins to suggest that the words and the usage of the words
yeah,
define meaning, and
yeah,
it's that shift from objectivity to subjectivity that actually reflects the complete shithole of a culture that we've got ourselves into.
yeah,
Because you then end up as a friend of ours used to talk endlessly about the dictatorship, the dictatorship of relativism.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I'd agree with much of that. The early Wittgenstein has a theory of meaning, which they call the picture theory of meaning, according to which language and reality at some point coincide. So propositions reflect or are pictures of actual states of affairs. So they're objectively true or objectively false if they fail to picture that state of affairs. The later Wittgenstein came to the view that this didn't take into account the many usages of language.
Right.
And it shifted onto a position whereby meaning is actually more or less how you use terms.
See, that's
So it's
terrible. I mean,
kind of it's kind of philosophy as linguistic anthropology, if you.
yes, that's. But the trouble is, although you can make, I don't mean, God save me from being pretentious. I can't help it. But although you can make a case for that, the implications are just awful in the hands of ordinary people. This
Mm.
just kicks the foundation of Catholic objectivism,
Yeah,
right from under our feet, and you can no longer refer to something that to be a posh moment gives you epistemological verification. You can't say, but here's our gauge for truth,
yeah.
and so how did you move from those kind of that woozy world of, well, it all depends on how you use it, to the Catholic world of objective truthfulness?
Well, all right, I'll do that as biography. But can I just say something about Anselm first, though? Because I think I feel
You
like
might
I've
lose me.
I
You
feel
might
like
lose me.
I've,
I'm not.
I feel like
I'm
I've
not a proper
confused
prophet.
him because
Yeah.
there's nothing rudimentary about Anselm, and um, I became interested. It's interesting that Anselm's ontological proof, that than which nothing greater can be conceived, must exist, and how he demonstrates God, was modified by 20th century logicians. The Notre Dame theologian who's still with us, I think, Alvin Plantinga was involved in this, as was Kurt Gödel, the logician. So there was always, to go back to your point about how can someone who is an academic have an attachment to a supernatural faith. There was a lot of interesting work being done in the last century in serious philosophical logic, which was kind of allow for repurposing of some of the earlier proofs for God. So there's that kind of, if you like, heritage there.
And of course, it's not. I mean, it's not a proof per se, is it? I mean, that's. But the beauty of it is, I'm always hugely intrigued when the steady state astronomers got themselves
Mm.
really excited about steady state, because the moment you can take out a first cause, then you don't have to deal with Anselm anymore. It's a kind of cheap way of saying there is no first cause, and without any first cause,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you don't even have to approach the question. One of the very exciting things that I think that's happened in the last 25 or 30 years in the world of astronomy is they've gone back to the first cause, the Fred Hoyle and the Big Bang. Something had to start it all off, something standing outside the time-space continuum, and
yeah.
therefore we're back to saying to dear old St Anselm, yeah, you got it, mate, that works for us.
Pretty much. And of course, one of the two people who first proposed what was came to be called the Big Bang theory was a Jesuit priest
Lement.
and
Yeah,
Lemaitre and
yeah.
mathematical physicist.
Yeah. In fact, it's
Um,
incredible how many. There's this wonderful book by Rodney Stark,
mm,
who talks about the way in which Catholicism has been traduced. Do you know, I just hadn't got the scope and the scale of the Enlightenment rationalistic propaganda campaign against Catholicism. So everything to the Inquisition, which they get completely wrong.
yeah,
They always get Galileo. They mispresent Galileo
yeah,
terribly.
yeah,
Galileo was put under very comfortable house arrest
yeah.
because he couldn't stop being rude to the Pope. Nothing to
Yes,
do with heliocentrism at
that's
all.
right.
And then so they said that, and then there's the whole business of steady state nonsense. The Inquisition they get wrong. I probably said that already, and I've got too excited and lost the point. What were you saying when I suddenly interrupted you so rudely?
Oh,
The Lemaitre. So the science,
yeah,
the almost all of the science that took us to where we are in the 17th century, once you go as far as Newton, who was an Anglican, was done by Catholic priests and monks.
yes,
All of it.
yes,
And the idea that you can therefore complain that Catholicism in particular and Christianity in general is somehow anti-truth, anti-science, anti-reality is just the most terrible piece of propaganda. Is there a polite word for bullshit? It's our channel. We can say it. We can use that word. It's propaganda bullshit of the worst kind.
I recently wrote an article called on which used bullshit in the title about
Did
Harry
they publish
Frankfurt's famous paper on bullshit, about the
it?
distinction between bullshit and
Yeah.
lying. So we can, as far as I'm concerned, we can go with bullshit.
Excellent. Let's do it. It's a very reasonable and well-grounded academic word.
It is actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
because I don't know how clever you are. I mean, did you notice that I mean, some of one's cleverest colleagues at the university, they were all bullshitters. I mean, there were times when they indulged in it in order to throw dust in your eye.
Yeah.
It was just a kind of normal way of
Well,
trying to
the
get
whole
ahead.
the whole exercise of we used to have a thing at Liverpool called, I think it's still going, called the Stapleton Society, which was every Monday afternoon. There wouldn't be any lecturers, but an external speaker would come and give a paper. Then there'd be tea and coffee, and then there would be a Q&A, which is all of that model of academic, in inverted commas, progress is bullshit. The whole thing is rubbish. The whole thing is a kind of joust between the guy giving the paper and everyone else, and it's great
Yes,
fun. It's
yes.
great fun, but there's an awful lot of bullshitting has to go on. If it
Yes, and you
wasn't,
can't take it seriously, and it really
no,
is all about it's a form of gladiatorial ego, waving. One of the things that I used to do was I ran a group called Skeptics Anonymous, deliberately modelled on Alcoholics Anonymous, because I felt that on the whole, if you thought someone was bullshitting, particularly if you're an undergraduate or postgraduate,
yeah,
you couldn't easily accuse them of doing it because they kind of give you an academic thick ear. So we had this group that met every week in which we discussed everything metaphysical. But there was a rule: everyone had a red paper napkin on their knee, and if for a moment they thought somebody else was bullshitting,
yeah,
as in using technical language to obfuscate and to get ahead,
yeah.
all you had to do was to wave the napkin, and the person giving the suspected of it had to define their terms in everyday language, and it just killed the
Yeah,
bullshitting dead. It
yeah.
was wonderful.
Did you have to say in Skeptics Anonymous, my name is Gavin, I'm a skeptic,
Yes,
or is it an
of course we
avalanche?
did. Yeah, that's right. This group lasted. I think when I was 25. About I was there for 23 years. It met every year in my office, and we sometimes have I don't know 20, 25 people. We held every week the same time, and people would turn up. And the idea was you could discuss anything that you thought meaningful at all with this anti-bullshit device, and
Yeah,
essentially it was a form of pre-evangelism because one of the things I felt very strongly, but given the how and why confusion, was that people were no longer allowed to ask ordinary questions. They weren't allowed to ask the why questions because
sure.
they sounded too stupid. And we used to be able to do it in pubs. And during my lifetime, they turned the music in pubs up so much you couldn't do it even there.
No, this is
So
true.
there were very few places where you could actually have a kind of grown up conversation of an inquiring kind. So I kind of built it into the weekly schedule in my
I,
office.
I found myself in an academic context definitely bullshitting, but accidentally saying something deep.
Oh well. The only things I say deep are always accidental. I've discovered it's
We
either
had
the Holy Spirit or my unconscious, but
we,
it's definitely not my frontal lobe, which
we,
is
we had
too
we
bad.
had a we had a philosopher called Barry Smith. Although Barry denies this, but I'm sure it was him, Barry Smith. I think he still is at University of London, who came to give a paper to us on the concept of geometric fetishism in geopolitics. Right, and his thesis, he presented this paper, and his argument was that wars start because people like their countries to be a nice shape. And he had all these slides about various countries where there were disputes, and there was something wrong with the shape. So there were kind of territorial aggressions going on to make them.
And in terms of argumentation, hard to falsify, I would think.
But he it only occurred to me years later that obviously this was bullshit. But what he was
Yes,
doing was kind of
yes.
subverting the whole paper Q&A model by turning up and giving this paper, which was, well, I thought nonsense.
But actually,
Nobody
people
said
don't
it.
realize how far it goes. I mean, the arch bullshitter for me, and I was a psychologist rather than, and I was a really, I wasn't a proper psychologist. I was one of those, how people jump onto the academic gravy train halfway through without having done the groundwork. So, I
Yeah,
mean, that was the kind of psychologist I was. And so, it's to be stupid to pretend I was better than I was. But the bits I knew quite well, but the whole load of stuff I didn't know. But one of the most serious cultural influences in our whole civilization was Sigmund Freud, who
sure.
turns out to be one of the worst examples of bullshitting ever, in that he faked all his results.
Yeah,
He did some clever and imaginative stuff, but most of the stuff he was serious about, it's all made up.
yeah.
Um, I mean, he did a paper on the future of an illusion and Moses monotheism. So, future of illusion, what he did was just for the sake, he went into a local mental asylum and he noticed people sort of bobbing and wringing their hands and doing all the various pathological things that the seriously mentally ill do.
Mm.
And because he had this terrible chip on his shoulder about Catholicism, something to do with his Bohemian nurse and his father being treated badly in the streets of Vienna, he decided that all this bobbing and hand wringing and um, obsessional choreographed behavior was exactly the same things what happened in the liturgy. So he said clearly, QED, all Christians, all Christian liturgy is by this definition, I mean, a completely false presupposition, a sign of mental illness. And on the basis of that, he wrote this book called The Future of an Illusion,
Yeah.
which then set running this appallingly dangerous idea, which is that belief is a form of neurosis. Which the rest, you then have to ask, okay, well, that was a piece of grand bullshitting. Why on earth did people swallow it? They swallowed it because they wanted to.
Yes.
So you had this literally stupid piece, this stupid thesis, deliberately malevolent and philosophically utterly untenable. And then the whole of Europe bought it because they were crossed with religion, and we still deal with it now. One of the reasons why it's hard to talk about religious experience is because this terrible, terrible thing that Freud set running, where people think if you're
Yeah.
going to talk about religion, you must be a bit mad, or you're going to go mad.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've
Well, no,
read
it
the
is an
book. I
example of
didn't realize
bullshit.
that that was those were the antecedents for it. I think
Yeah.
that's interesting. But I was going to explain how I became Catholic specifically.
Sorry, I interrupted you. People accuse me quite often. I've noted oh, for God's sake, there goes Ashenden interrupting again. But then they're quite right, of course. And I have to apologise. But I mean, the trouble is, it's the art of conversation, isn't it?
No, it
Why
was my
doesn't it get?
fault. It was my fault because I said, "Can we go back to Anselm?"
No,
Um,
there's no fault here at all. We're entitled to have a conversation, and we bid to take the conversation in different directions. You're bidding now. Go, you win the bid. Go.
yeah, I mean, I had those kind of an intellectual conviction that there were good arguments that God existed, but you don't find God in the conclusion of a syllogism. Um, that's not faith. So my journey specifically to Catholicism started probably in 2015, when I was an active alcoholic, and I had managed to drink myself and my then 6-year-old son homeless,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
so that my son had to be taken and looked after by the wider family going. So God bless
Mm,
them for that. And he was driven away from me, from a car park in a place called Westbury in Wiltshire, not that far from where I am now. I
mm.
live in Devizes now, with him actually. And my thought, and it was the start of November 2015, and it was extremely cold. I had nowhere to live. Okay,
Oh,
and
so
my
sorry.
thought, as my son was being driven away from me, my thought was, good, good. I can now go to the pub, have another wine, and think about where I'm going to sleep tonight. And
Oh,
and
so
I
sorry.
spent 2 years, both street homeless, hostel homeless, then street homeless, then hostel homeless. And in the course of that 2 years, that's where my conversion took place. I went from, I think I mentioned this to you on the phone when we were talking the other day. I went from being someone who could not think about anything except in terms of alcohol. And they call it the demon drink for good reason. I think there is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
metaphysical truth there, actually. And who was railing against a God he didn't really believe in, except through some vague intellectual assent, if asked.
Mm,
Gradually, to someone who was genuinely thanking our Lord Jesus Christ for leading me through these 2 years. And I was confirmed into the Catholic Church on Holy Saturday at the Easter Vigil Mass, which is my favourite Mass of the year anyway,
mm, mm.
um, in 2017, um, in Salisbury at St Osmond's Church. and that was kind of when my conversion of affection took place, very very slowly, incrementally. Whilst I was living a life of petty criminality, actually, because I was
Really?
street. Oh yeah, yeah. When you're someone who lives on the streets, you become immoral. Partly, I believe, because you end up with a very disordered relationship to time itself. Time
Mm.
starts to mean something different to you.
Mm.
And when time means something different to you, then so does ethics. So does what counts as being the right thing to do and what counts as being the
Mm.
wrong thing to do. So I was shoplifting. I was doing worse than shoplifting. I was bilking hotels. I was booking into. I could only do that at the start of this because it
Mm.
became pretty apparent physically what this isn't a guy you wanted booking into the hotel.
He's not going to pay his
Um, yeah, and it was. I knew gradually. I knew that the Lord was coming to me. I found myself in Salisbury. Like I say, I was confirmed into the Catholic Church in 2017 in Salisbury with my son, who was then 7, sitting next to me. I left that church and my life hasn't been the same since.
Wow.
And I'd found my way into a recovery fellowship, which you've already named, actually. Um, and or there was a kind of a beautiful awfulness to the whole thing and a beautiful serendipity to the whole thing. God put in place during those 2 years all the variables which had to be in place for me to get well and to come to Him. And yeah, I left that church having had a spiritual experience when I left the church, which has gradually become a spiritual awakening, because those two things aren't the same thing. So that was my conversion to Catholicism, which I think, to go back to your original question, um, I believe the magisterium of the Catholic Church, the Catholic Catechism, the writings of the Church Fathers, taken together, are the most beautiful and exciting intellectual construction, infused by the Holy Spirit, the greatest intellectual thing that there is in the universe.
Yes, I think that too. I mean, I'm trying to work my way through it on the channel,
Yeah,
and I'm going more slowly than I want to, but partly out of awe, and who on earth am I to even reflect on this thing? But I'm the same as anybody else. I can have reflections, and they'll help people at the same stage as me. More importantly, did you during this period at all read Francis Thompson's Hound of Heaven?
I did. I did because it was recommended in a tape I listened to, by what they call in Alcoholics Anonymous an old timer
Mm,
called Ray O'Keefe, who was a New York lawyer, and he'd been 40 years sober, and he was doing what we call in AA a share,
mm.
and he referred specifically to that. Yeah, that, and I think in the same share also. So yes, yes, I am familiar with it now because of that.
And
Um,
he wasn't Francis Thompson homeless quite a lot.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I don't
yeah.
know if it was I think I've forgotten,
And he
but
also referred in that share to some poetry by Christopher Smart, who was
yes.
mad, basically.
No, absolutely. Yes. See, my two biggest fears: homelessness and madness. I mean, but
Yeah,
both,
I've
you
known
know,
them
you
both.
know. Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because I thought I wouldn't have survived what you're survived. I'm not nearly tough enough, and I just thought, given the journey you've been through, it's just to have managed at all. It's really quite incredible, and I can't find anywhere talking about it without running the risk of being patronising to you. But I
I
mean,
didn't do anything. It was God. I don't
tell,
take it. And the prayers of intercession of my son, I think, as well.
oh,
Um,
that's lovely. Did he become a Catholic with you?
not with me. Ben was baptized. We eventually, in the latter half of 2017, he came back to live with me properly in the flat we're in now in Devizes. I had him baptized shortly after that, the start of 2018. He did his first communion 2 or 3 years after that,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's just, because we had the whole ghastly lockdown stuff,
Oh,
and
yes,
the
2019.
the,
Yes,
the, the, the churches, I think, behaved, certainly Clifton
terrible,
has behaved very
terrible.
badly over that. His confirmation process was interrupted, so we've got a new priest, new-ish priest, who, I say new, he was here 40 years ago, and then went away and he's come back again. And Ben is going through the confirmation process with him, so he'll be confirmed at this year's Easter Vigil.
How old is he?
He's now 16. He's now
Fantastic.
16.
You mentioned your conversion of affection, and I presumably you did that because you're contrasting it to your conversion of the mind. Is that
Yeah.
right? And how did the two relate together?
Um, I think possibly. I think they certainly complement each other. I wouldn't want to say. I guess the conceptual housework had been done, so it wasn't a problem for me to intellectually assent to what was going on in my life was when I was homeless was because someone else was guiding me through it. So that made sense to me. But the conversion of affection was I couldn't really intellectualize it. It was like the development of a friendship or a relationship. I mean, how do you unpack that? I mean, I came to know Jesus. And came to talk to Jesus. And when you go through the 12-step recovery process, prayer is a part of that. And the prayer life became very important to me, and those prayers were answered sometimes in very peculiar and strange ways, but they were answered. So how did they relate to each other? More than just being two stages of my life, I think. But I wouldn't want to go so far as to say that the learning about theology was a necessary condition of the later conversion. I think that would be putting it too strong.
I've never quite understood the relationship between the two. That's not to say that there isn't one.
No.
There is one. I mean, like you, if I can jump in for a moment, I had a strange experience when I was 19 because I think I drunk myself to death. I drank a bottle of vodka, a liter, and I'm pretty sure that I asphyxiated. I'm fairly sure that it so dulled my respiratory system that I then had one of those classical experiences of leaving the body, and then the details don't matter. I've talked about them elsewhere. But for the point of this conversation, I left my body. I went to judgment. I was judged. I thought I might be sent to hell. I was forgiven and sent back. And I came to sort of at dawn in the morning thinking, so God's real. And so, well, that's interesting. That's, who knew? I was extremely grateful for the well-being that I felt because normally I can't do alcohol. I'm as sick as a pig and I'm on the toilet for days. So it just poisons me. So here I was very well after sinking a liter of vodka and recovered, thinking, how do I keep this feeling? I must go and forgive people. So I start off forgiving. But it took a complete breakdown of coping before the affection bit ever even emerged. So if you'd said to me, "Well, do you believe in God?" I'd say, "Oh yeah, no, I've met him. He's it's quite nice, really. Forgives you, sends you back. Good guy. I mean, somewhere else, not but it was. But I can't. I just can't. I must. I worried I suffered from some kind of schizophrenic decompartmentalism, that my sense of affection only got engaged when I fell flat on my face again for other reasons. And suddenly there came a point when there was the opportunity to marry the mind and the heart.
Yeah, that's grace, isn't it? That's what grace is.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, except I think that's it's kind of slightly circular. Yes, as a definition, it's absolutely grace. What I think I don't understand in my own head, I think there is no way. There's no way of making a formulaic relationship between grace and intellectual assent.
No, I agree. No, I agree.
That's
I
what I'm
agree.
saying.
So I mean, I was thinking about this before we started recording, and I was about the contrast between my earlier assent to God and my later relationship with Christ, and therefore with God. And I think one hesitates to compare oneself to St. Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, no one doesn't. You're
But
too
it's
modern.
like the encounter he had with our Lord, telling him, "You've written well of me. What do you want?" Well,
Yes.
nothing except you, my Lord. And
Yes.
and those 3 million words of beautiful theology that he'd written, compared to that encounter, meant nothing.
Yes. And people don't
It's
know
chafe.
that.
It's chafe.
I mean,
And
he
that's kind of I can relate to that.
yeah. Yeah.
I had a similar experience to you as well because I got my sobriety back for several years. And then 2 years ago, I had a relapse, which didn't last very long,
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
lasted long enough to put me in hospital.
Oh,
That same child who'd been driven away from me found me in this room on the floor, having basically, it looked to him like I was gone.
yeah.
He later said to me that he had a confession to make to me, which was that he prayed before dialing 999, and I said, Ben, that's not something you need to confess before.
Bless. Wow.
And I spent 8 weeks in Royal United Hospital in Bath, just down the road. Two of them in a coma, and in that coma, I had experiences which I know were kind of intimations of what was waiting for me if I ever picked up an alcoholic drink again. And these
Right.
were not hallucinations. They were not dreams because they were like sequential stories with their own autonomous narrative structure,
Oh, really? What a kind
linked
of
by
road to hell thing.
a common
Yeah.
theme of what hell would mean for me. And what
Yeah.
hell meant for me was permanent separation from what you love, but
Yes.
that thing is just outside of your reach.
Yeah.
Permanent.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes. I mean, that is, I mean, I'm frightened of purgatory, and I'm
mm,
terrified of hell, because the thought of what ultimately, when we're dead, because we're completely contingent creatures, we will want and long for the God who made us,
mm,
and want and long for all the things that He is: kindness, forgiveness, mercy, laughter, gentleness, understanding, and be absolutely incapable from our end of receiving it. And
yes,
that, I mean, that's just, it's not just unrequited love, which in itself is an example of hell, I think,
yes.
but unrequited love by a factor of 15,000. I mean, it's terrifying.
This, this was
If only people understood that.
this was requited love, um, but it would not be able to be enacted. It was
But
permanently.
that's what I mean by unrequited. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was kind of. My son was in most of these experiences, and for example, in one of them, he was outside the window of this flat, and I was saying to him, "Just climb through the window, Ben. You can come and
yeah,
see me." He said, "No, the man says I can't do that, and
yeah,
I've got a few minutes, and I've got to go. I love you, Dad."
yeah, yeah. Oh my word. Oh my word.
I came out of that coma still pretty delirious for a couple of weeks, and I think I was a complete nightmare. Um, um,
But these were warnings, weren't they? I mean,
No, they were warnings. They were intimations. And in some of those, you do not remember dreams 2 years later. You just don't.
no, 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 no.
Um,
But you do visions. You do.
Visions you do, and the detail, if anything, is becoming
Gets
consolidated over
sharper.
time. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the distinctions in terms of spiritual direction that people often make.
Yeah.
This thing in your head, is it growing stronger or weaker? If it's growing weaker, it was probably a dream. But if it's a vision or an intimation or a warning, my goodness, it gets stronger.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Very
this
much so.
this
And
event of sorry, go on.
in in some of them, there were people I knew. In
Mm,
some of them, there were people I didn't know. And in some of them, there were people I didn't know but came to know, who I hadn't
mm,
known before, and yet
mm.
somehow featured in these visions. I've explained this to people who were reductionists or secularists or people who don't have faith, and even some people who claim to have faith, but they've kind of written it off as, well. You were in a bad way. You were wired up to machines. There must be some naturalistic explanation of this. And
Yeah, reductionists.
yeah,
Yes.
and I know what I know.
Yes, I think again it's an example either of people who've been culturally affected by this Freudian heresy that I've mentioned, or I think sometimes actually, I mean, it's partly to do with Ashton's first law of metaphysics, which is the less able you are to deal with the dimension you've been describing, the more you take refuge in the pragmatics of politics and political activism and the empirical. I
Yeah,
think you
agree.
one can so repudiate the supernatural and the grace filled that after a while you develop a callous over your soul, and it becomes impossible. It's a bit like the inaccessibility of God you were describing earlier on. Hitting early. If you go on refusing these intimations. I'm sure I know throughout my life I've been meeting people who will say, "Well, there was this moment when," and then they'll describe moments of being envisioned or enlightened or charmed in the proper sense, and then they've lived lives of repudiation,
Mm,
where you can then see that actually there's some kind of there's like some the lens has got a covering over it, or there's the skin has grown thicker, and it takes often a huge crisis or an earthquake to break through that hardened exterior. It's almost God gives us these moments of sensitivity and openness, and if we continue to toughen ourselves up, that toughening up is part of the exercise of free will. He says, well, like Lewis eventually saying, hell is locked from your side only. You
mm.
lock.
Yes, yes, absolutely right.
So sorry, I interrupted you. You were
No, no, no.
so these intimations. As you came round, you said, "Okay, I'm taking these seriously, and this is going to help me keep the wheels on."
It settled the question.
Yeah,
I mean, what had happened to me, Gavin, was, and I didn't have a particularly extended relapse. We're only talking about a few weeks. But if you are an alcoholic as opposed to someone who's just drink, and I was drinking for years. I mean, I'd say I could have had a reasonably good academic career, but I was more interested in getting drunk and sleeping around.
yeah.
And my fiance at the time didn't like either, actually. Um,
They tend not to.
no, no, funny like that. But my mind, just like I said earlier on, I just thought about everything in terms of the categories of alcohol. Even when I was sober, I was doing 3 or 4 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous a week to keep things at bay. Um,
Do you,
and
can I just ask, do you see it as a? I mean, many people, particularly the humble way in which you've and the vulnerable way in which you've described it, may see it as a form of moral weakness. Do accept that there might be some kind of biological flaw in you. That I've always thought that alcoholism. I mean, the different addictions. There's some kind of biological predication involved. That this is,
yeah,
once you start feeding your system something that it, in a disordered way, is particularly vulnerable to, you start a process that's very difficult to control.
I think that's true. I hesitate to say that to people who don't understand the condition of alcoholism because they think you're copping out somehow
Yeah.
by describing it in those terms. But I think there are some people who are just genuinely allergic to alcohol as a chemical,
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
and, and
This
and and yet want more and more of it.
So
And
this is one of those moments when reductionism is right. So let us
I
forget the
am,
critics and
yeah,
say, okay, so we all have kind of disordered system. I've got I appear to have a tendency to corpulence, and that might kill me too. But different people have disorders of different kinds. But the alcoholic disorder is something that once you initiate it, and the reason it's so dangerous is because biologically you start a kind of chemical system of chemical
yeah,
changes
yeah.
that trap you in an addiction, and it's not your fault. I mean, it's almost. I mean, it's quite unhelpful to use terms of fault, because although society wants to,
No,
it's a way of pointing the finger saying don't go down that route. It's actually the biology you've inherited.
well, I'm not a reductionist, but I do believe that there are genuine causal mechanisms at work in the world. Just that the analysis of them is kind of often wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I accept that there is a physics of alcoholism, um, and I also though think that if you look at the 12-step recovery program, it is it is saying to you, which by the way only mentions alcohol right at the start. After it mentions alcohol in step one, and then it's not mentioned at all. The
Mm.
rest of it is kind of a set of exhortations to live a better life day by day. And responsibility is built into that. You were required to do a searching moral inventory of yourself. You are then, when you're further down the recovery process, required to do by the 12. You don't have to do it, but
Mm.
you can go out and drink again if you want. But if you're going to follow the steps, then steps 8 and 9 are to look at the ways in which you've harmed other people, take responsibility for that, and if possible, take amends. I mean, when I went through the steps the first time, every hotel I built and robbed, I went back to and
Oh,
said, "It's
did
up
you?
to you. I'm gonna give you the money that I owe you." Um,
Oh, you'll make me cry. Oh, that's so
And
beautiful.
most, in a couple of cases, it was met with a bit of bewilderment because we were talking about a few years later.
Mm.
Um, but mostly, people were genuinely kind of pleasantly surprised, and in a couple of cases, didn't want the money,
Yeah,
although I insisted on giving it to them.
yeah, yeah,
So, if you don't take responsibility on a day-to-day basis, you are going to get sick again.
yeah.
So to say that and I think it's a disease in the sense that you're spiritually ill at ease if you're in any addiction. And I think
And
there's
this,
uniquely pernicious about alcohol.
I think, oh, I think there really is. My father, when I was 11, took me down the tube. He worked in the city, and there was a guy in a bad way at the end of the particular platform. And Dad said to me, "You see that man?" I said, "Yeah, poor bloke." And Dad said, "That's the cleverest legal brain in Cambridge.
Yeah,
In,
yeah,
in my generation, he was the cleverest of us lawyers, and we looked up to him as immensely intelligent, gifted, kind, lovely man, and that's all that's left to him." And I said, "Dad, hasn't anyone tried to help me?" He said, "Yes, we've all tried to help
yeah,
him, of
yeah,
course, and it's been impossible." And he said, "I'm showing you because you're getting to be an age where you'll be an adult soon. I want to show you how dangerous alcohol is." And what my father said to me was, he used to brew his own beer, and he used to say, "I consider myself incredibly lucky that I have a biology that isn't disordered in a way that
mm,
will make me an addict." Because he said, "I think I like alcohol so much that one tweak of an enzyme and I would be an alcoholic."
yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah. I think
and
that's a good
it
way of
just so
looking at it,
happens.
or an accurate way of looking at it. I,
Right.
I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous uh, in Salisbury when I was sleeping in the car park behind Sainsbury's there, and it was basically somewhere I wanted to go to get warm for an hour,
Yeah.
and I knew I'd get a hot drink, and it was the most bizarre but wonderful experience, Gavin, because I was sat there, and the first person who shared it was a share meeting. Not all meetings are the same. This
Yeah.
was someone giving their story of experience, strength, and hope as a recovering alcoholic. And this person shared a story of obviously alcoholism, but loss of family, imprisonment,
Mm.
loss of job, and it was just the whole thing was ghastly. And the first person who shared back said, "Thank you for a beautiful share." And it's, I've said this to people before, and I think I wrote about it actually for the magazine I'm assistant editor of, Country Squire. It's like if you listen to the readings at mass, and there's a reading from, I don't know, 2 Samuel or Kings or something, and it's all butchery and murder and war and whatever, and then we at the end we say thanks be to God.
Right.
It's kind of like that. But someone the other day said Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where people go and tell horrible stories and everyone laughs, which is
Yes.
what it is. And but going back to your point, I don't think I know many stupid alcoholics. I mean, I'm going to
No.
a meeting tonight, which
No.
I'm secretary at.
Yeah.
Very clever people, most of them,
Yeah.
because you have to be a drunk. Until you hit rock bottom, you have to
Yes.
develop strategies of dissimulation and dishonesty, which require a certain creativity. Also, when I was street homeless, I met some very clever people as well.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I've always taken the view that um, I don't want. I mean, you're very careful when you say I'm not trying to evade moral responsibility, but I've always taken the view, in terms of what we've discussed so far, that I suspect that the degree of moral responsibility is very, very much more reduced than we think. And then what you've
The
also got,
pros and
in
cons.
terms of being a Christian,
Mm,
you've got repentance and forgiveness are are the stuff by which lives get mended and safeguarded, literally saved. And there is no, in the world of empiricism, in the world of how, there is nothing like that. I mean, there's medicine, of course, and there's
yeah,
anesthetics, fantastic,
yeah,
but inevitably in an addiction, there's a you it starts with the corruption of the body, but the corruption of the mind follows,
sure.
because they're
Mm,
linked. And so to get the mind uncorrupted is an act of immense grace and transformation. And I think one of the things that
mm,
one of the reasons why I could not be a Christian after trying is it's just so extraordinarily effective in terms of rescuing people the way we're made,
mm.
given that we're made like this. Jesus, grace, forgiveness, love, hope. This is the raw material of reconstructed, wounded sinners and people.
Yes, I agree with you. And in the specific case of the AA fellowship, you have there in at work a recovery program, a 12-step program, ordered to a spiritual physics, which is just inexplicable in terms of the grubby utilitarian calculus that
Oh, I love that. I've never heard the phrase spiritual physics before, especially not compared with the the grubby empirical calculus. That's very. I love that. That's very good. That's surely a title for a new essay.
I think I've heard someone else say it, but like David Bowie says, genius steals.
Yes. Well,
Alan Borrow's genius steals.
Oscar Wilde famously heard somebody say, perhaps George Bernard Shaw, and Oscar said, "Oh, that's very clever. I wish I'd said that."
You
And
will, yeah,
you will, Oscar. You will.
yeah.
Good.
But yes, it's quite a thing. It's quite a thing. And when I came out of that coma, everything was settled really.
Yeah.
I had yearnings for three things. I had a yearning for God primarily, a yearning to get back into the AA fellowship because I knew that I would be greeted with love. There would be no recriminations because I'd had a relapse, and a yearning to be with Ben. And since then, I had not even had a thought of a drink.
That's wonderful.
And it's
That's
only
just
2 years, so it's still baby steps. But
yes. Oh, yeah.
and it's something. Also, I was thinking about it. You hear this expression that alcoholics use, or recovering addicts in general use, about one day at a time. And I was thinking about this, and the office of the liturgy of the hours, if you like, the
Mm,
holy office. And I was thinking, when you first go into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, one day at a time means just get through today, tick today,
yeah.
get your head down on a pillow without having taken a drink and worry about tomorrow, hand it over to God tomorrow,
Mm,
just get through today. It comes to mean over time more than that. It comes to mean a way of giving dignity to the day. So
mm.
one day at a time, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, even if it's just putting on a clean shirt or something, but just build into the day a life, sanctify the day is what it comes to mean.
I was thinking it's either sanctifying time or redeeming time in a way,
Yeah,
saving it,
yeah,
giving it some meaning and some dignity, so that it doesn't just flow away wastefully. That
yeah,
the time does flow away so wastefully, and
yeah. And
one of the things about
people in active recovery have the gift of realizing that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We all well, it's a spiritual perception. We all ought to realize it. And I used to have a sense when I was an Anglican clergyman, wanting to be a Roman Catholic priest, that thinking that of all the words I ever used, they would disappear and never be remembered by anyone ever. God might remember my prayers. I had this very strong feeling that when I was at the Protestant altar intoning the Sanctus, that was the only significantly, permanently meaningful moment of my life. Those were the only words that mattered.
Yeah,
Really, everything else was derivative, second rate, third rate, fourth rate, fifth rate, until nothing. I wondered if my life was going to be weighed by the number of times I had said Sanctus, and I just somehow thought, yeah, I think so. I think this is the only current. This language is the only one that has real currency when it comes to mene tekel passin.
the number of times you say it, or the way you say it.
I couldn't make well, so that's interesting. That's a Protestant Catholic distinction. As a Protestant, I thought it was the way I said it. As a Catholic, I've now decided it's the number of times.
That's
I, I,
interesting.
I well, because I've begun to feel that there is an objectivity to the offering of worship, prayers, psalms in particular,
Yeah,
and that as a Protestant, I was often put off saying psalms or saying prayers because the diabolic voice snuck into my head, but you won't mean it enough. It will be illegitimate until you can mean it and consider you can reach a threshold of integrity. You have no right to do this,
mm,
and I'm sorry to say that often gets you. If you're a Catholic, you're completely immune from that. When it says, "But you don't," but I don't have to mean it. I'm not going to mean it. I'm just going to say it. And as I disturb the oxygen with the holy words, so they are effective. I often think that that magic, we ought to understand our faith much more in terms of magic than we do. So the reasons we don't is we're terrified of magic and we assume magic is a kind of decadent faith. But actually, magic, like all things diabolic, is derivative. It doesn't
Mm,
invent anything. It borrows.
sure.
And it was a while before I thought, do you know, all these psalms and prayers, they're holy spells. I just need to say the spell. It doesn't matter what I think or where my feelings are or what. Just say the spell in the name of Jesus or the Holy Trinity, whatever. A bit like St. Patrick, I bind to myself today in the name of the Holy Trinity. And so, one of the things I've really loved about being a Catholic is just saying the spells, no matter what state I'm in, grace or not, and a sense that I'm disturbing the air with holiness. And is it the second law of thermodynamics? None of it is wasted. It will continue, and therefore that I think is part of the vision of monasticism. You give your life to disturbing the air with holy spells because you know perfectly well that it's going to change the atmospheric pressure. It's going to change the thermodynamics, the metaphysics. And that's why you stop and say prayers all that, not to feel better, not to be holy or pious, but because you're adding to the sum total of holiness in this contested environment.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Um,
And therefore, it's saying Sanctus, not how you say it.
yeah, yeah, okay, okay, yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting it, Gavin.
But
Um,
it's a way of looking at it that allows you to pray more often. I think that was, I would get so put off by perfectionism or by I mean, if we're talking about it, Satan and the demons always breathe deceit into our minds,
yeah,
and I'm particularly stupid when it comes to this. I've got friends who are much more alert than I am, and it takes me a while to discover it's a con. So for a bit, I think, oh yes, that must be true. I'm not worthy, or I dare not, I cannot, I will not, whatever. And slowly, very slowly, as I'm getting older, I'm going to be dead soon. There isn't long to practice it. The sense that no, that's nonsense. I'm just going to say it. I'll stop and say the Lord's Prayer now. I'll stop and say the Gloria. I'll stop and say a psalm. Let's bother the other side with a bit of holiness, and because there are also other people doing the opposite. So it's a kind of tug of war, really.
we have at my local church. We pray the Rosary before Mass every Tuesday morning and every Thursday morning. And when it's my turn to do the decade, um, and I'm doing the 10 Hail Marys, I do try to kind of say it differently each time.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with imputing meaning. I mean,
Yes, that's kind of what I'm getting at
no,
because
no, I think, we're entirely free to impute meaning. It's just the trouble is, in terms of the spiritual life, the devil always takes something good and then tries to pervert it. So,
yes,
if we impute meaning and then rely on the imputation of meaning, we
yeah,
will have a contrary force coming at us saying, "You've screwed that up, haven't you? You don't mean it enough," and then it all blows up. So,
yeah,
if you're kind of ambidextrous and say, "Well, I can impute meaning, I could do it without imputing meaning," if you're going to threaten me one way, I'll do it the other. The way I manage the
yeah,
repetition of the rosary, because
absolutely
I've
right. Yeah,
heard people do it, is that um, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. I always put in a name, family, friends. So, somebody gets prayed for by name. And then like you, I kind of shift the weight of the words.
yes,
So as the words go by, I'll give the words different weight, different concentration. By the time you finish putting names in and you shifted the words, one can pray the rosary endlessly and never have run out of imputed meaning. In fact,
mm, yeah. Okay, yes, I agree with all of that. I just mere replication. I think is. I mean, I'm thinking about my AI days now, and how AI is quite possibly satanic because
oh, no doubt, absolutely.
any and it's part of the replication stuff. Part of the fact that you've got little nuggets of information endlessly replicated at high speed that cut.
Now, look, this is terribly
What's
interesting.
wrong with it?
And we've been going an hour and 10 minutes, which I think
Yeah,
means we've probably lost. It's probably just you and me again. Everyone else has dropped off. But I'd like to talk about AI and the demonic. I know you've done it before elsewhere, as have I. But I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. I wrote an article which I myself as editor graciously published.
You pitched it to yourself.
I pitched it to myself, and myself said, "Yeah, this is bad. You could have done better, but I'll put it up there." We take stuff of all sorts, and especially when you're the author. Otherwise, nothing will get. But can we stop this now? I think we should give people a rest now. But can we come back to this in another conversation about?
Yes,
Uh, uh,
if you'd like to, if people want to see that, definitely. I've enjoyed it.
well, I don't. I mean, I'm very pleased if people do want to see it. But frankly, this is a selfish activity. I've loved talking to you, and and I've really enjoyed it. And there'll be a few oddballs who come along with us too. So we may only get 325 views, but there'll be quality views, and
Well,
then perhaps we.
I know some of the people who'll be watching us. So my friend Ria is going to be watching us, and a couple of other people, and they're good people. So
Right.
we've got
Well,
at least
shout out to the good people.
shout out to the good people. Assuming you don't cut that bit out.
I'm not cutting any of it out. Unlike
Can
some
we
rival.
negotiate that? Can we?
No, no, no. There is no editing doing here. It's
Okay.
one take. It's one take, and
It's like that one take of "Let It Be" that I sent you the other day.
yeah. That wasn't that fantastic. Do you know? I
I
am
can
not
tell you
going
something else about that, Gavin. My father was in the studio.
well, seriously. Well,
Yeah.
let's do a postscript on that.
My father.
You
I just
say
have to say this then, because people will think well, I am a bit of a nutter, but people will think I'm a dishonest nutter. My father was a music journalist, worked for Melody Maker and Record Mirror, and
you're not claiming to be descendant of Paul McCartney.
no, no. We did used to have George come to the house quite a lot, though.
Oh,
Um,
that's so posh. That
mm.
is so posh.
Well, there
I
was nothing
can't.
posh about it. There was him. There was Engelbert Humperdinck, or Jerry, as my mum used to call him. This was when we lived in Bittersea Rise in Mill Hill in North London, and my
Right.
dad used to have this, or my parents used to have this sort of once a month Friday evening salon for other music journalists and
Oh
showbiz
God,
people.
this is one-upmanship of the most ebullient kind. I can't, you leave me in your wake, my man. Well, go on, do it, mate. But be flamboyant. So Engelbert Humperdinck, George
My,
Harrison, who
my
else?
mother, my mother threw him out a couple of times. Jerry Dawson, because he overstayed his welcome. I wrote a piece about that. I wrote a piece about it for Daniel Johnson's online magazine, The Article.
Oh,
And I
I
kind
am
of
the
I
son.
made some awful joke about my mother. My mother, please released him into the cold night air of North London on several occasions.
I
But
am
and
the
he was,
son
he
of
was
another
Engelbert
son.
Humperdinck. It's not like it was pre-fame. It was no, it was all very
That's
clear.
very funny. But you can claim to be the son of the woman bouncer who sent Humperdinck on his way. I think that's very,
Yeah.
very funny.
Oh, I've got
Very
more where that came from. I remember George Harrison as a kid. He was very, very nice. They were very fond of George, my parents.
I'm
Um,
not surprised.
John, not so much.
All kinds. Oh,
But
really? Well, what it's in that thing that you sent me where you said, this is the point where that video that either your father took or was in. As you said, they're not talking to each other anymore. I mean, John just looks so sour. I
yeah,
thought, how can you make music when you're looking so resentful? And
yeah,
it was extraordinary. Yeah. Wow.
yeah. It was a very, very strange time. My dad says there was just a bad feeling about the whole thing until they started playing the music, and briefly that kind of all went away. And there was all sorts of business arguments going on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, of course, absolutely. Well, goodness. Look, Sean, this has been such fun, and
Yes, sorry, I
to
digress.
the high
We've
to
been
the
all
high
over the
quality.
place. We started with some relatively first order philosophy takes, and we've gone everywhere. So
Well, we've got
sorry
we've
about
got
that.
that's the whole point, and there are people who will be absolutely love this, and other people who think that they have never seen a couple of more pretentious bullshitters in their life, and maybe they haven't. In which case, that's absolutely we've all got to be good at something.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking personally, um, Sean, this has been really lovely. Thank you. It's been
No,
and
thank
and,
you, Gavin. It's been great.
and thank you for sharing those bits of holy encounter, which I think one of the things that I think is so wonderful about the internet is, we will we will launch this. I just I but stop myself. I always thought doing a PhD was the closest a man could come to having a baby, because you'd conceive of this idea and you'd bring it to birth and you'd give it birth, and then it would develop legs. The examiners would dance with it, and then a publisher would dance with it, and then a book publisher would dance with it, and your flipping idea went places where you had no longer any control over it, and the bloody thing had a life of its own. And you waved goodbye to your thesis and your idea as it danced with other people who then thought they owned it, that's a long way of saying there are things which we put on the internet and they will have a life of their own. So, I mean, if I get run over in 4 years' time, this will outlive me, and it may be there's somebody who hears our conversation who's dealing exactly with some of the issues we've done, and grace and life and love will come to them because we've set this conversation, we've disturbed the air with holy conversation, and it will.
I hope so.
God will give it life and use it.
Can I mention where they can read my stuff?
Oh yes, you must.
Okay. It's all over the place though. So I'm the Conservative Woman, the Critic, magazine I'm assistant editor of called Country Squire, Daniel Johnson's The Article magazine, the other platform we're not supposed to talk about.
Yes, the Voldemort platform. No, we're banned. They're banned. We give them no more exposure.
And other places. I do show up if you do a search.
Well, I still think we've had this previous conversation. I think you should do your own Substack, become your I do it. Nobody else will publish me, but you could do it and just bring all your collected stuff together, and people. It needs to be in one place, doesn't it?
I've started doing it. At the moment, it's not a very good Substack at the moment. But
yes, no, don't keep those thoughts away. It is your Substack. You write some extraordinarily interesting material, and with respect, I think what you should do is from your back archives, just take stuff and publish 1 or 2 a week, and that'll keep you going for months. And then you'll build it up. People will say, "Gosh, this is worth more than £5, and or $5 or whatever it is." No, I really think you write awfully well, and
that's high praise coming from you.
No, really, well, not at all. I'm quite good at marking. I know good stuff when I see it. I then try and replicate it, of course, and rip it off.
But let's talk about AI next time. Yeah,
let's do that. They're brilliant. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been such a pleasure. And for those of you who've lasted to the end, God bless you. Great credit to you.
Thank you for watching. Thank you.